You are welcome to have that chair. Sorry. We're gonna start as soon as we all have a seat. You think this is good here or here in the chair? I had it here in the chair.
Say that again?
Sorry, do you think the Zoom is better here or here in the chair? So it's not like on top of you.
Okay, so the Zoom.
Yeah, so I don't really know about live streaming Zoom at a live event. I know like you know more about this.
It has to be that they have to see where, this is where the folks, they have to see both.
Yeah, they do.
So then, we'll take, so we'll have it like this, right here. Yeah, let's move this. And he can sit right next to me. Okay, and where is he?
He is right there in the suit. He's coming, he's eating a pizza, and he should be here.
Okay, right. Yeah, hi. Hi.
I'm Rachel. I'm sorry. Oh,
Oh, there's people here. Hello. We're happy to have you.
Thank you so much. How are you?
We'll be starting in like 2 minutes.
No problem. We're here.
Can you hear?
Yes, it can.
Yes, yes, we
Okay,
could
good.
hear. Pastor Philip.
They'll be seated
Hello.
in front of you in 1 minute.
Okay.
Make the volume a little louder.
Hey, Bishop, how are you, sir?
I am doing good. Second time for the day.
Yes, sir. Nice to see you.
Amen. Amen.
They are already saying
Hey, Pastor, how are you?
Hi, so nice to meet you.
she just had her daughter in here yesterday. And she's here. Okay. And then we'll start in like 2. Okay. You're good? You're supposed to just have a seat.
No, I did.
I was very smart, very happy. I was like, actually, right.
You want to clean that a little
Oh,
bit.
that's a good idea.
No, no.
Yeah,
Could use a-
I'm gonna get
yeah.
a.
Okay.
It's not good. I'm at the end of the camera. What do you think? Should I get a HD? I have a 1080 camera upstairs.
You want to do that?
4K camera. I can get one.
Get a what?
I'm gonna get the 4K camera.
So you just set it up and pick up and just jump in. And,
Yeah, exactly. So let me put on.
and how are they
Testing. Yeah, it should be good. Okay. Perfect. Yeah, this should be good. I'm just gonna test it. Testing the microphone, testing. Testing microphone, testing. Testing microphone, testing. Yeah, we're good. Okay.
Oh.
It's no easy.
Until the bell.
Really? She said they be a worker. That's how it is. Eesh.
Political activism was deeply based on his connection and what he spoke about in terms of themes of slavery and redemption in the Bible. And therefore, the 1960s and into 1970s were really a golden period of the connection between Blacks and Jews, between the African American community and the Jewish community. So that much like we learn about on Tu B'Shvat about the trees and the roots that grow there, and then hopefully flourish, there are deep roots between our communities, but there have been what we might call some kinks in the roadway that I think are important to also talk about, because we have to think about how to rebuild, in some cases, the relationship. So really, it's a great honor to have tonight. I have a terrific bio regarding Pastor Guilford Monrose, who has really been a visionary leader, serving as a pastor, the Mount Zion congregation in Brooklyn, and was head of working with the borough president of Brooklyn in addition to serving on the community boards there, but he was serving in Brooklyn with the Brooklyn borough president, who is now currently our mayor, just became our mayor, Eric Adams. And as director of the faith-based and clergy initiatives in the office of the Brooklyn borough president since in 2013, he really was able to bring faith leaders together of different traditions to really improve the situation on a religious basis between different Brooklyn communities. Brooklyn is blessed with such a diversity of populations and a diversity of religious populations. We're lucky now that the pastor's talent that was only more locally based in Brooklyn, it will now be citywide. And he'll tell you in a moment, because he now is holding a similar position within the mayor's office, and we'll be working with a wide variety of clergy people outside of Brooklyn. So I've only given a little bit of an
That's good
appetizer.
enough.
Tell us a little bit about what you did in Brooklyn, what you see you're going to be doing now
Sure.
in the mayor's office.
So thank you for having me and the team who came with me, and those of you who are online, and those of you who are in this room as well. I think the most important thing that is not in the bio, I think it's in the end, but it should be on the top, is that I am a father and I'm a husband. Those two trump any title that I can ever receive and accolades. I am a superhero in my household, and I'm going to leave it that way. So that's my beauty and my joy. So those two things are very, very dear to me. But you know, people identify you by what you do. Unfortunately, whenever I go to conferences, people say, "What do you do?" No, it's who I am. And I think that, you know, for the work that we're doing is trying to figure out how do we, with all of our diversities and our differences, be able to live in a city that is complex, that is diverse, that is needing of people of like mind in order to move the city forward. So I think that the biggest challenge that we face is really and truly, how do we live alongside each other, right? And so that means to say that, as you see, even when it gets to the dark side of things, even when it comes to crime, people commit crime where they live. And so you will see that this is going to show up in our discussion as to the different communities and how do we look at crime, what is the reason for the violence that we see, but also to how do faith leaders really step forward. And even you as like just millennials and normal citizens, and being Jewish and being Black, African American from the Caribbean, you know, what is your role and what is your responsibility? So during Dr. King weekend, I think that someone said to me that America is a Bible quoting nation, not a Bible believing nation. So I think that on MLK Day, we quote MLK, but we don't do MLK. And I think that we need to move away from the aspect of trying to, for lack of a better term, whitewash what Dr. King said. You know, in his last sermon, and like I said today, the early church, Dr. King was a Baptist preacher. He was not a philosopher. He was a preacher. He preached from the word. He preached from the scriptures. Don't you know that we're celebrating a pastor who was a Baptist preacher, who was just like a regular preacher, just trying to make a difference, not understanding the impact in which he would have. So I think that with the work that we want to do and accomplish, it must come from a moral framework. It doesn't mean that if you are atheist or you're humanist or you are of another religion or creed, the point is the things that he did was from his moral compass, right? He looked at the world from the lens of the scripture. And I think that today everyone's celebrating him. We have never had an argument or a conversation that Dr. King was a preacher, and he used the scripture in order to push America forward. So I think that we should be clear that as I speak, I need to speak to you from a framework of understanding that Dr. King is a religious figure, he's a spiritual leader, and therefore we have to speak in spiritual terms, because I think that is the only safe place that we can be, right? If I speak from a political term, I might get in trouble. But if you speak from a religious term, you still get in trouble, but it's good trouble. And I think that is what is needed today in our conversation around Dr. King and the work that I'm going to be bringing to City Hall, and the work that I've done with the 6-7 Precinct Clergy Council, the God Squad, and the work that I'm doing at my local church. It is all steeped in a tradition of activism, not me being an activist, but me being an advocate for the issues that really, really troubles our community and plagues our community.
So thank you really.
That was
for
long, but
yeah, no,
yeah,
but
sorry
I
about
think
that.
I think it was very important, because I think you touched on something twofold. One, that sometimes in America there's such a fear of the entanglement of church and state, and how we see things within what the founding fathers what their vision was, is that sometimes it's not a question of it's not separation of, but it's rather a complete negation of a religious message in the public sphere because of that concern. That's number one. Number two, what I wonder is your work that you did in Brooklyn, and now you'll be doing citywide. How do you take your theological message and have it as a pluralistic message? How do you see working with men and women from a variety of religious faiths and communities who maybe theologically, of course, there's going to be a great divergence? What is the thing that can help bring everybody together?
So I don't always agree with myself too, right? I disagree with myself sometimes. So there will be disagreement. So what I say is that everyone have the right in New York City to access the resources of New York City, regardless of your religion. And so if you have the right to pray, we want all of the other religions to have the right to pray, right? So I'm not a big proponent of prayer back in schools, because I think that what we did is that we took prayer out of the home. That is worse to me than in school, because I want to be able to teach my children how do they connect with God, right? Because as a father, I have a connection with the Father, right? Like, so my children, I want them to learn spirituality from me and not in a school. So, so what I would say is that everyone has the ability and the right to be able to teach the children in the way in which they deem is necessary for faith. City government is for all people, and therefore faith communities should have access to resources, funding, and an operational and city services to everyone. So it's the same for a mosque, or a masjid, or a shul, a synagogue, a church, or an assembly. My responsibility is that if you have an issue with Department of Buildings, that we have a way that we can triage those issues to you, because then that will help you do your job as a spiritual leaders in your community. So I deal with it from a standpoint that if my security depends on both of us, if we live in a violent city, you're at risk of also being harmed. If we can agree that regardless of our religion, that we want a safe city, then this is something that we should all collectively work on. So if a light pole is out in my community that is dark, I have issues with gangs, with gun violence, it behoves all of us to be able to work on the central issue, because we all want to be safe. So basically, that's the approach that I bring to the city with the different faiths and cultures.
So other than yourself and your leadership, whom do you see within our city as among the best broadly religious leaders who are perpetuating the true spirit of what Dr. King represented?
Yeah, so there's a lot of great people among us. Probably you never met me before, right? And I don't think that I'm famous, but I think that we need to look for gems in places that we will not normally look at it. So I've been saying to boardrooms that I go into and I speak to individuals, and I say to them, this is my central message, that sometimes you probably looking at an application of a young person who wants a job. And for me, I had a young lady who we hired 140 young people this summer in Flatbush with the God Squad. And one young lady, I told her to come in for an interview. She blew off the interview. She said, like, nah, I gotta go over here with my girl. She's not understanding that you can't do that. So I said, you better get yourself back over here tomorrow. She came, she was in shorts. She had no idea. What do? I hired her. Why? Because these are the people that when something happened, we all say, oh my Lord, this happened to that person. And we put all our energy in the negative, and put all our energy in saying that, look what happened to this young lady. So we have to find those individuals that you asked me about in different ways down your block. So we have, you want to name names?
Yeah, if you want.
Oh, okay.
I mean, this is not the house.
Let me see who's on Zoom. Let me mention them first.
You know?
Okay, so on Zoom, let me just start with the people who's on Zoom, because I think that
that's the safest.
Yeah, that's it. So I got Bishop Orlando Finlater, who went to the White House over 25 times in the Obama era. We protested against immigration in the Obama era than any other president of the United States, and you wouldn't think that that would be the case, right?
So
Yeah, because he deported more people
52
like myself,
Center,
than
there's
any
30
other
people, and there's
president
40 people at
in
this
terms of his tenure as president. So we will always go to Washington, D.C. We took 100 pastors from the Caribbean and Africa to Washington, D.C. I think it was in 2010. I can't remember, somewhere around there. And Bishop Faleda, who is on right now, he was the one who led that. You probably don't know his name, but he is one of the heroes. Then we have Natasha Christopher. She's not a faith leader, but she's definitely faithful. Her son, Akil Christopher, was shot and killed at the age of 14. He lived for a couple of days and he died on his 15th birthday. And so she's an advocate with us. And so these are the people who I believe they are the gem of New York City. They're not known, just like Dr. King was one of the most hated individuals. At the time of his death, he was not popular whatsoever. He was actually assassinated. Hello, he was killed. A preacher who was dealing with non-violence, who said, do not even walk with a pencil to a march, was killed because he was considered to be what? Violent? No. He was considered to be changing the face of America and tearing down white supremacy in our communities. And that's why he was killed and assassinated. But if he wasn't killed and assassinated, we probably wouldn't be talking about MLK today. And so we look at all of these individuals, like pastors who are doing great work, who don't have a major platform. I look at them as my heroes because those are the individuals that when we call them, they come to the aid of our communities. They keep you safe at night. They're the ones during the march and the protest who's out there trying to figure out, listen, don't tear our community up. You know, we have to live here. We can deal with the police department. Yes, we want accountability, but at the same time, we want our children to be able to go to school and we want our individuals to go use the train and so on and so forth. So those are what I would say would be my heroes, and many unnamed, of course.
Right, of course. And I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Rabbi Mark Wilds, who's on the Zoom, unfortunately.
Yeah, brother, you skip out on me today. We're gonna get you for that.
Just sometimes good to know we're going through the same that you're going through. Because you're good.
Oh,
yeah. All right.
There we go. And I mentioned that because MJE every year has a commemoration for
I
Dr.
never heard of
King.
MG before this week.
Yes.
I was like, okay, MG.
But it's so important because the constituents are, as you can see, are younger people for whom this if you don't have firsthand a taste of what it was like to ever hear Dr. King, or even in the end.
Yeah, I'm the closest that they're gonna get. Yeah,
right.
just so
You
you
know,
know.
it's just so important because of everything that he represented. When you're talking about nonviolence, if someone says you can't even bring a pencil to a rally and yet is killed, is assassinated, it gives you a sense of what America was going through. Now, the Jewish community this week had just such another terrible trauma of another visceral show of anti-Semitism on Shabbat, where a synagogue, someone came in and held the rabbi and others hostage for 11 hours. And it reminded everybody that unfortunately, anti-Semitism is alive and well in the country. And Jews are being at times not just targeted in synagogues, but the Anti-Defamation League and the FBI that track levels of anti-Semitism and attacks on Jews have shown massive increases in the last number of years. So that from that standpoint, one would think that there would be sort of a natural affinity with other people, for example, people of color for whom there is so much, what we've seen, turmoil in the country of a different kind of prejudice, but yet, and this is, I think, a painful question even to ask, is that I think for many members of the American Jewish community, at times we're confused by sometimes where we see anti-Semitism coming out of the African American community. Last year or two, where certain celebrities, athletes, etc., made hurtful remarks. And I think we just from a kind of even an intellectual point of view, have tried to understand why, because we seem to have so much in common, just in terms of that being seen as the other, as being seen as targets. And it's not just intellectually, you know, where people are quiet. Feel about that, and what you feel that that really can be, like, what is missing that would allow this to even be perpetuated?
Yeah, so so for the most part, like, I don't, Black athletes and superstars and those who are affluent doesn't have the total experience, unfortunately, as a poor Black individual living in East Flatbush, living in Harlem and Bronx, right? So that's why I don't necessarily follow athletes who are not engaged in what we're doing. So I apologize that I don't know of all of what was said, believe it or not. But what I could tell you for sure is that people who are in pain, and the fact that one of the first bombings of a house of worship was, again, during those eras of civil rights era. I mean, when you look at it, we went down to Texas, where a pastor was shot and killed in his church. And so of churches on a whole too as well, enormous violence. The Black church, enormous violence. And basically we were there, you know, standing with just one or two friends, but standing on our own. When you look at the last standing African-American institution is the Black church. The Black church is responsible for just about every major movement or every major change in America over the last 50 years. It's been the Black church. Unfortunately, in American society, if you look on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, the people that are sensationalized and the people who are lifted up, unfortunately, those individuals that you just called is the ones in the Black community who is on top. They don't speak for all of us, right? Just like not one Jewish person speak for the Jewish community or one Muslim person speak for the Jewish community. And some of these comments and maybe you might find that is borderline anti-Semitism. You know, I have to look back and say to myself, like, you know, I've said some hurtful things to my wife, but I still love her. She's on, I think. And she could tell that I love her, but it was hurtful. And I had to go back and say, why am I feeling this pain? And so you say things and it's hurtful, but it doesn't mean that you are a hurtful person. It doesn't mean that you're an evil person. It doesn't mean that you wish evil upon every individual to go to the point of assassination or go to the point of killing an individual. So, and then also too, when you have individuals who hate the community, that would have this done in Texas, where you would go in and hold hostages. That in of itself is an issue that we have in our community that looks at the other, like they look at you as the other, like you're affluent. And that is not true. There are Jewish people who are poor, there's Jewish people who are struggling, there's Jewish people that don't have $1 billion or $1 million. They work their way up from the bootstrap, and that is true all throughout. And I think that for us too as well, we have to be able to remember that people who are oppressed should never become the oppressor. And so for us, and I think for the Black community, is that we have to keep our eyes on our mission, which is we are living in a state of oppression. Whereas I could never change the color of my skin, and I can't switch out to be considered to be white. I can't switch out to be considered to be something else. I am always Black. And so I was saying to my church this weekend, myself and my brother-in-law was going to Canada to preach. I live in the hood, in the neighborhood, and 3 o'clock in the morning, we're getting ready to go to Canada. He has this nice Escalade. I was like, okay, brother-in-law, my sister did well. Escalade. And so 3 o'clock in the morning, we put our stuff in. Police guard shows up. He's like, hey, what's going on? And, you know, I'm in my sweats. And just me being a pastor, 2 pastors who are independently doing this work is being pulled over by a police officer because we are Black and we're in a neighborhood. That is something that I can't change and I can't get out of. So what I want my Black community to remember is that we can't get out of and we can't lose track of the fact that we are being oppressed every single day. And not because we see another group maybe is advancing, that we have to point our finger at them and pull them down with us. So I think it's going to take work. And I think that we are better together. And our work and our job is to make sure that the generations that is coming up, that they understand that we have to fight for what we have to fight for. But at the same time, we can't pull on another community because we think that they're doing better than us.
Right. I myself, just in some of the Black Jewish dialogue, I personally been involved in. I mentioned that the third group of the poorest people in New York are Jews.
Correct.
In other words, people don't realize the large number of Jews who are at the poverty level, or what's even worse, just if you're not at the poverty level, but almost at the poverty level, where you're not getting certain entitlements, and how difficult it is. And it seems to me from what you're saying is that the educational component is so important, because again, younger people within both communities need to know about how the Black and Jewish community work together, and how much there's more similarity than everybody would imagine. I can speak from personal experience about, it must have been about 25 years ago when I was myself involved. I worked for the public advocate, the city of New York, and we did a program in which we brought together Jewish high school students and African-American high school students. And we took everybody together to the Museum of Jewish Heritage so that everybody could learn about not just the Holocaust, but what they also do there, but kind of about the American Jewish experience in America, and the anti-Semitism going back to when the first Jews arrived here. And Peter Stuyvesant, who was the mayor of New York, didn't want them here, and went and implored the Dutch East India Company, said, take them back. And they said, no, they're there, you can't. And in a sense, that was one of the original ideas of religious freedom in America to apply to all. We then took everybody to the Schomburg Museum, which is a museum of the African-American experience. And at the time, I even, for that component, a couple of my children were really little at the time. They had an exhibit on slavery, and I'll never forget, they had the handcuffs that would go on the hands of children, toddlers, that were kept in handcuffs. They were this, I still have a picture, they were this big. And one of my daughters, who at the time I think was 3 or 4, said, Mommy, what is that? And I explained to her, and her eyes like wide. And I said, you know how B'nai Israel, how the Jewish people were enslaved in Egypt. This is how in modern day history, we had an example of people who were enslaved into modern times, who didn't have the same rights and what we have to do, etc. So I think that educational component, a lot of it also based on a shared biblical basis of understanding about oppression and about how one overcomes it, and the importance of keeping one's self-identity, but not then turning to the becoming, as you said, allowing prejudice. So that I think you laid that out very beautifully. Do you think that there are special challenges particular to the city of New York? You were more Brooklyn based, but now when you look at the city of the whole city as a whole, because there's so much diversity and differences in so many different neighborhoods.
Challenges?
Yeah.
For you? Yeah. There's a lot of challenges, of course. Okay, so if you have, okay, why is it that you have 500 young people who were shot and killed last year in New York City, that they all fit the same model, right? Like the same mold. You have to think to yourself, why is this? Like, why is it that you don't have friends who were caught up in the gang lifestyle? Like, you call all your friends from school, they went to a yeshiva with you, or whatever the case is, you call them up, you're like, oh, I'm over here, I'm doing this. It's not just because it's an individual thing, it's a systematic thing. It's racism. Like, systematic racism means to say that you have a lot of these things against you. Dr. King today, when I listened to him on his last speech, the last Sunday before he was shot and killed, he said that to say to us that we need to pull ourselves up by the bootstrap is very, misleading because we don't have boots on. So why is it that most young Black men would leave school in New York City and can only read on a 5th grade level? Why is it? How do you get through 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12th grade and you can't read? Hello. That's a problem. So these issues are not about individual. So when we are pushing against things, we are pushing against systems, governmental systems that are set in place for years upon years. And so when people say, oh, we have the first Black president, okay, but there are systems in place that you have to work out of. That the president of the United States, Barack Obama, could not even have a Black agenda because, quote unquote, he will look too Black. Think about that. You should have a Jewish agenda. You should have a Black agenda. You need to have all the agendas. That's what we do. You need an agenda for a meeting. You need an agenda for a problem. And he didn't have a Black agenda. That is not okay. So what you're seeing is systematic, right? And that's why when you go in places, you have to try to break those things down. And when we move up, we have to try to go back and pull people up because it's the way the system is designed and is doing exactly what it's designed to do. Young Black men committing most of the crime. That don't mean that we are violent. I'm not violent. I grew up in poverty. I was poor. I don't equate violence with poverty, but they're indicators that the places where you had most COVID deaths were the places that you had the lowest census returns and the places where you had the more violence. It's not science. Like Dr. King talked about the fact that we were over at Vietnam fighting for freedom in Vietnam, but yet when we get back home, we could not eat at the same table as the same person that we were fighting with overseas. Is a level of hypocrisy that we have in our communities. And I want to say to you right now, it's the same today. I'm listening to his messages and I'm like, man, he's in our business today. So we have to be the ones to change the trajectory of America. America must live up to its true meaning and its creed. If we believe in the dream, we need to make sure that we wake up from the nightmare in which we're in order to say what are the issues that we have, systematic issues. All of our Black young boys should learn to read. And they should learn to read in the educational system that has one of the biggest and largest budgets in New York City. It should learn. So a friend told me in Washington, DC, the schools are failing, of course, predominantly Black. And he said that the way that you change that system is that you put every congressperson child in those schools and they will learn the next day. They will have all the resources in which they have. But again, it's systematic. So what we're seeing right now is like, you need real help. You need real aid to the community so that our Black young boys and girls would really and truly find avenues to be successful. And that is my prayer. That's why my lifelong work is about the people that Christ talked about. Jesus said that the poor that you have among you, and I use the word poor, even though in election they don't use poor, working class, poor or poor. Those people that you have among us, and we need an agenda for those individuals.
I recently, I don't know if others saw this, such a beautiful story connected to the passing of Sidney Poitier, who was an iconic actor, in which he came to New York and was trying to find work as an actor, and he didn't know how to read. He read so haltingly. They said, well, you can't read a script. And he just almost went into a state of despair and ended up, I think, working as a waiter. And he met there an older Jewish man who said, if you can't read, I will help you.
Mm.
And he taught him to read and taught him how to enunciate. And he said that his whole style of acting came from this older man that he said he spent a lifetime trying to track down to thank him. So it seems almost that people need mentors. They need somebody that can, can work. It's not perhaps, as you said, just throwing money at a situation, but it's almost like personal involvement
Yeah.
of a one-on-one. Is that something realistic that can be done in New
Yeah.
York?
Yeah. My team will tell you that. I would always say that money without compassion is just money. Throwing money at the homelessness situation in New York City, by just throwing money at it, it's not necessarily going to help a situation. You have to understand exactly why someone is homeless, right? And we have to come with a real comprehensive plan. This person is not my friend because they should know that I'm here tonight. They're calling me. I'm going to talk to them. They should be on Zoom or something. And what we need to do is that we really need to figure out, moving forward, how are we going to be able to change the narrative of the things that we see and the things that we have in front of us. And I think that the challenge for us is going to become, basically what do we want to be, what we want to do moving forward. I would also say it's like the money is good and we need the money, but we really need the money at the right place. It's like you going shopping, you don't want to buy all carrots, right, when you need something else. So the money is good, but we have to make sure that we put the right resources in the right places. So I'm going to encourage all of you, like, as I said before, is that you always give people an opportunity who you believe had a bad resume, but you can see that, that person is really trying to be somebody. Like someone took a chance on me and said, you know what, I'm going to hire you. And I was like, really? And I did the best that I could do, right? So also too, systematic racism means that it's going to take a lot of years to change. Dr. King 1957 speech on Give Us the Ballot. Today we're trying to pass the Voting Rights Act to help us to remain legitimate to vote. Today, 1957, we're in 2022. That's a problem. Like, why is there not an outcry with that? Because we are so, we believe that, wow, this really can be happening. It might be something like Democratic or Republican, and so we get caught up in those things. But look at what we're saying that we're trying to pass today. The right to be able to vote without any hindrance, right? Those are systematic. Those, back in the 50s, the way that they would get you not to vote is that they will come and they'll be like, okay, tell me how much red marbles is in this drawer, in this jar. And then you'll be like 5. And they're like, nope, you can't vote today. They give you all these obstacles. But what about if you modernize the obstacles? You need 4 pieces of ID when you know for sure that this community, those individuals, they don't really get IDs. So you're stocking up things so that you can get to the same point where Dr. King was saying that this is what you're doing to our community is systematic racism. So the people in this room, the millennials who are going to be future executives and who would have a say in policy and government, if you're really true about Dr. King, you have to look at the indicators. Why would someone, again, push a young person, this lady on the train track? Why would a 30-year-old shoot and kill a 19-year-old girl for $100 in a Wendy's? Why would you have gangs and crews and cliques who are working and who are selling drugs and who would spend 25 years and never take a train from Brooklyn to Manhattan, right? Young people who can only go on one block and they can't go to the next block because this block is theirs, that other block belongs to another crew. Who live like that? We live like that. And it happens every single day in New York City. So my message to all of you is that we have to look at what is really ailing our communities, and then you try to be the change agent of what Dr. King was saying. And I think that if we can get even 5 of you in this room to decide that you're going to commit yourself to be able to have a more perfect union, I think that this world is going to be a better place, because it takes a smaller group amount of people who are committed and dedicated to what the Torah says about justice and peace, and to be able to understand what God called us to do, right? And what God called us to be. If we believe in the Torah, if we believe in what God says about humanity, then all of us is the same. That's why the Sabbath is a beautiful thing, because everyone, including the slave, had to break on the 7th day. It shows the equality and justice. And so what that means for us is that God, even though we had people in slavery, all of us was considered to be holy, to break and have a rest on the 7th day. He showed that humanity is what brings us together, and what this is his crowning jewel and jewel is humanity. And so if we can find a way to make sure that the people who are down can come up with us, I think we'll truly live out what Martin Luther King said and what he lived and what he displayed in his life.
It's such a beautiful message. And I think for us resonates so much in our tradition. For example, like the Passover Seder, we're still months away. It's cold outside, but sooner the spring will be here, and the Passover Pesach will be here. We say in every generation, a person has to see themselves as though they left Egypt. And one of the great the major Jewish philosopher Maimonides slightly changed the grammar on the word, that in every generation you have to see yourself leaving Egypt, to say in every generation you have to demonstrate a way. In other words, viscerally, it's not just that emotionally you feel something and you connect to that, but you have to demonstrate it in some way. So for Jews from, for example, at a Passover Seder, Jews from Muslim countries, Arab countries, and other places will physically get up, will get up and will at the Seder hit themselves with scallions to, in terms of demonstrating. But Maimonides' point goes much deeper than that. It means that that's not just something that happened thousands of years ago, but we have to liberate ourselves today, and we have to connect with other people who need also to be liberated. So that the message I'm hearing is that every one of us, we talk about tikkun olam, repairing the world, but the repairing the world is not just the big, it's too big to start out there. We have to start with ourselves and with our own communities. And I think it's so wonderful that so many young people came out tonight to hear this message. And hopefully we can create greater bonds and different ways to work together. Sure. We might not always agree. You might not agree with every single thing that the pastor said, but
if 2 people agree on everything, one is a fool.
Right. They're certainly not Jewish. That I can say, right? So that we know. Right? But I think the fact that we're here tonight and having an open dialogue is something that, and we should be very grateful to Manhattan Jewish Experience, Rabbi Wilds, for helping initiate this, because I think it's not the end of a program, it's just the beginning. And I hope we'll have other opportunities to really get to talk to you, Pastor. I welcome also Pastor Williams from Brooklyn. It's wonderful to have you as well, and your leadership, which makes so much of an impact within the same community. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And stay warm and safe. And that's all.
I think we're doing.
Yeah.
Can we do like 3 questions?
Sure.
Time is late, but like 3 questions.
Sure. Okay. What's your name? Devorah. Okay.
No, Zebura.
Dahora. Okay.
No, Zebura.
Zebura.
You'll get it another time.
Okay.
My question to you is, how do you feel you activate community members to have conversations? Because so much when it comes to tackling hate crimes or whatever it might be, we always see the leaders talking for us. And even in the Jewish community, we'll have one Reform, one Orthodox talk, and then on average, Jews don't talk to each other. And then they're like, let's get together on anti-Semitism. And you're like, where were you for X, Y, and Z? So I think it's more important to learn how do we mobilize the average person to have conversation. And it is hard because we keep to the groups that we feel comfortable and safe by. And I see that because we can't even talk about hate crimes as somewhere else. In New York City, if anyone knows, the statistics were over the pandemic, the domestic violence went up 120%. Hate crimes went up 80%. This is New York frickin' city. So if this is not a place that people could have healthy dialogue and are still in their bubbles, what does it say about us as a liberal society if when push comes to shove, we have a trigger that makes this fight even hard? So I'm curious to know what has effectively worked for you to engaging people outside of leaders, because those are the people that are causing the misinformation and the attacks on a daily basis.
Yeah, definitely a big question. That's a White House type. Yeah.
We had a
So-
woman who's just murdered
So
for hate.
yeah.
in a subway.
So what I would say is that what I would always say to my colleagues, Jewish colleagues and otherwise, right? I can only show up for you when you have an incident.
Right.
You also have to show up for me as well.
Right.
And so yes, you know, I got a lot of calls when we had the incident on Saturday with the hostage that was in Texas.
Yeah.
A lot of people were saying, let's do something.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, a lot of people are held hostage in Brooklyn too, as well, in New York City, Chicago, and those places. I want some of that same energy around that. So that's why we're speaking in silos. It's because I need to be able to be there for you. Because if I'm the one screaming, I'm going to be like an angry black man screaming about things.
But you know what? I had that sentiment and I was seen as controversial, which I don't think it should be, because we saw even in New York, people say, fight for me when I'm hurting.
Yes.
But when they're not, someone else is hurting, where was the coming together? We should live in a world, it shouldn't have to be what your identity is to come out and
Right.
help, because you know what it feels like. And
Right.
it seems in New York City, out of all places, it's still hard to get people out of their homogeneous boxes and to really help. I mean, we do a much better job than most of the world because
Yeah.
we're meshed together, but it's just, it really is the average person that you need to
Yeah.
be a trigger to then go out and attack. And we can't always rely on the leaders. So that's why the information doesn't always trickle down.
Right.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much for your comment.
I think that's important to note, and thank you for that. But again, you know, all communities are fighting for themselves. And I would like, again, that the things that hurt us the most, that people also come and tie into that.
Right.
Because on the average, right, you can find that even in schools, when parents go to school and looking at injustices, these are people who are fighting for just civil rights. I was saying to my church, we're talking about civil rights. Civil rights. That's the lowest form of rights that you can ask for. And so when people are busy trying to figure out, how am I going to change my community around, because definitely the garbage is not being picked up or the lights in the park is not being done, local people are making those choices, like local people in the community board. And I think that you would probably be amazed to see how much people are in tune with what you're saying in those communities. They're really hoping and fighting for justice across the board because they themselves want to be able to have people to fight for them as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah. What's your name?
My name is Christopher Smith. I'm from the Bronx.
From the Bronx.
GX. so my phone is here. So my question is, so just to follow up what he's saying, like every time I see the news, I see people stabbing on the train, and you see the last year, and I see the 19-year-old girl. You see the last year we had a bigger incident in Harlem. We had a bigger incident in Harlem. It was the one of the 19-year-old girl was murdered in Burger King. He was working there, got murdered, shooting, and which was unacceptable.
So what you want to know?
So my question is, have you heard Did you, are you have heard from, have you heard from the news that that the girl was murdered in Burger King?
If I heard the news,
Yes.
yeah, I was on the phone with her mom today. She's gonna be buried. Well, she's gonna be having a funeral service tomorrow, Tuesday, from 2 to 6, and also on Wednesday, and then she'll be flown to Puerto Rico for her final resting place. That's my life work, you know. One of the things that you probably don't know, but I started a group many years ago of all moms who lost their children to gun violence, and today I have about 50 moms in that group. So I'm very much so keen as to what happens in our city when it comes to the violence that we see. Very, very close to it.
Pastor, thank you so much for just a wonderful conversation, dialogue, and really, I think we will leave enlightened and inspired. So
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so
Great
much.
host. How's everybody on the line? You guys good? Thank you for coming on. You got 20 of you on. Take care, everybody. Have a good night.